Okay, I am live. Hi, everybody. I did not intend to compete with Bernie Sanders tonight. This case unintentional. Hi, everybody. I did not intend to compete with Bernie Sanders tonight. So anyway, I was originally scheduled to start at 9 o'clock, but I postponed for 15 minutes, as you see, to try to get closer to when Bernie was going to finish up. He was having a really marvelous discussion with a panel of people over the crisis and public health policy in general and the kinds of things that we have to do. And really was an excellent discussion. So I'm very unhappy to have interrupted it for some of you who chose to be here, and very unhappy to have interrupted it for myself as well, because I was enjoying the discussion. Some of the panelists were truly great people. In fact, they all were truly great people, but uh, two of my favorite great people, Jayapal and Abdul Sayed, were there, and they were terrific, I thought. So that was great. Okay, tonight what I want to talk about is two basic subjects. First, I want to go over virus news, some of which is truly outrageous. But then I want to move to news about uh, what the Congress may do about it, and how it can fund what are likely to be enormous efforts, truly enormous efforts. So let us start off with the virus news. In the description of this particular live stream, I call your attention to a YouTube by John W. Campbell, who's a physician, in England, who gives a rundown every day of what's going on with the virus, the coronavirus. And his perspective on it is worldwide, and he goes over what's going on in various countries. What he did this morning, hiya Sandy, hi Andrew, hi Dale, hi Dolores, thank you for being here. What he did this morning is he went over the reason why it's so vital to bend the curve, to flatten the curve, and what a difference it makes for the healthcare system in terms of the number of cases that have to be treated for the healthcare system. And the way he explained it was by going through variations in the amount of time it takes to actually double the number of cases to be treated. And he showed how it makes a huge difference if you can reduce the doubling time. Okay, and he presented a table. He walked people through a table, and he shows people the truly enormous difference it makes. Okay, in a simple way. Okay, in other words, if you start off with one case, okay, and you have basically okay, a factor, okay, an exponential factor of 1.5, at the end of 30 days, the number of cases you have is only 11.4 cases. On the other hand, okay, if the exponential factor you're using goes as high as 3, then after 30 days, you're dealing with 729 cases. Okay, and it appears that in the United States right now, we're dealing with something like a 2.5 exponential figure. And what we really need to do is to reduce that down first to 2.0 and then to 1.5 if we possibly can, to limit the number, okay, of cases, so that the healthcare system will be able to handle them, and so that there's more time for the antivirals to come out and give people a more effective way of treating the virus. So this is really critical, and when you see his treatment in that particular video, which I urge you all to watch, I urge you all to click on the link to the video. Okay, it's a YouTube video, and to sit through it. It's maybe 20 minutes, but it really gives you a gut feeling for the concept of the doubling time, okay, of the number, okay, of cases once the virus starts to spread. And you really need that feel to understand the magnitude of that problem when you lose control of the doubling time. And on the other hand, when you gain control of it and you reduce the doubling time, and in that way you flatten the curve of the number of cases, you then create a tremendous advantage for the healthcare system. And of course, what he's trying to point out is that the techniques of social distancing, isolation, staying at home, that we're all practicing now are just vital in reducing the number of cases that the healthcare system has to take care of, and just vital in reducing the load that has to be assumed, the burden that has to be assumed by the healthcare system. Okay, so for a gut understanding of this, go see that video. It won't take you that long, but I assure you, you'll never forget the basics of it, and you'll get a good understanding as to how important it is to go through things like shutdowns. Now, it's very important also to relate this to policy, because shutdowns, they're things Donald Trump doesn't want to implement, that he doesn't want to engage in. He wants to fool around maybe for 2 weeks, and then he wants to go back to, being normal and having a normal economy. He wants to do it by Easter. Okay, and of course, he's not going to be able to bend the curve in 2 weeks' time. He doesn't even have a total shutdown going on right now. And we won't have the masks, and we won't have the equipment. And if he tries to go back to normal life within 2 weeks' time, the result is going to be a total explosion of the number of cases. By the way, we're going to see an explosion right now anyway, because there are all kinds of cases that have not yet been discovered, and we are starting to test in very large quantities now. So, day after day, the number of discovered cases is going to multiply now, and multiply very, very quickly, and is going to start to put a tremendous burden on the healthcare system. Now, of course, they'll tell you 80% of the cases, people are just going to get well, or they're going to have a mild situation, okay, and they're going to get well. Yeah, true, true, true. But what about the other 20% of the cases? They have to be treated in some way. It may be that 8 of the 20% will be able to stay out of the hospital, but maybe 12% of the total number of cases will have to go into the hospital. Sandy says, can you please put the link to the video in the comments at the end of this stream? Oh, well, yes, I can, but the link to the video is already in the description. So you should be able to access it easily, Sandy, okay, because it's in the description. If you have a problem accessing it, okay, let me know, and I'll put the comments at the end of the live stream as well. But I included that particular video, okay? So, to go on now, other virus news, okay, all right? In other virus news, we have a massive scandal. There is a drug that has been showing some promise as an antiviral drug. It was originally developed actually for the Ebola outbreak. It never worked on Ebola, but it was being tested for effectiveness on the coronavirus, and the results have been very promising. The name of the drug, which I've mentioned here a number of times already, is actually remdesivir, okay, is what it's called, and it's produced by Gilead Sciences, which I believe is a California company. So, the scandal that just happened is that you'll find it in the Common Dreams link, okay, that I supplied. Trump's FDA granted Gilead Sciences exclusivity on this drug that is so promising as an antiviral treatment for the coronavirus. And the article by Julia Conley, a staff writer, okay, of Common Dreams, points out that the pharmaceutical company Gilead Sciences had ties, okay, to the Trump administration, and it's been granted exclusive status for remdesivir to treat the illness, a potential windfall for the company that could put the medication out of reach for many Americans. The Intercept reported on Monday that the FDA granted to Gilead Sciences what's called orphan, quote-unquote, drug status for remdesivir. This designation is generally reserved for drugs that treat rare illnesses which affect fewer than 200,000 Americans. But companies can be eligible for the designation, but if the designation, as in this case, of a rapidly spreading virus is made before a disease spreads beyond the 200,000 limit. So this COVID-19 is very likely to go way beyond the $200,000 limit. It won't be a rare disease, and treatment for it, okay, is going to be necessary. And here an exception has been made, and they're granting orphan status to that particular drug. Right now, as of this date, about 40,000 Americans have contracted COVID-19. And at that point, the orphan status was granted to remdesivir on Monday. And the disease is spreading faster in the U.S. than other countries. By Tuesday afternoon, this afternoon, more than 51,000 Americans had confirmed cases. So 11,000 more cases were added in one day. Having secured orphan drug status, Gilead Sciences can now profit exclusively off the drug for 7 years and could block other manufacturers from developing generic versions of the drug, which might be much more accessible to many patients. The company can set price controls on the drug, as well as benefiting from grants and tax credits. Joe Grogan, who's a member of Donald Trump's coronavirus task force, worked as a lobbyist from 2011 to 2017, often working on issues regarding the pricing of drugs. And Ryan Grimm, the bureau chief for The Intercept, well known here, said, "This is a massive scandal. Trump's FDA just granted a drug that is being used to treat coronavirus patients, which was developed previously by Gilead Sciences, orphan status, giving the company 7 years of exclusivity." Now, this is exactly the opposite of what should have been done. Bernie remarked, he called the reports of profiteering, by Gilead Sciences with the support of the Trump administration, quote, insane and unacceptable, and demanded the treatment for the coronavirus be made free for all Americans. And you can be sure that if Bernie turns things around and gets into the White House, one of the first things he's going to do is have Congress pass a law removing this orphan status for the drug. Of course, many people will probably have died by then because they won't have access to the drug. This is truly, truly disgusting. Of course, most everything Trump does is absolutely disgusting, but this one is truly disgusting. I mean, the greed of these people knows no bounds. The Orphan Drug Act of 1983 was passed to ensure medications for rare diseases, so that there would be a way of benefiting companies who chose to develop treatments for the diseases. But if there are too few cases, they would not recoup their research costs. But as Sharon Lerner and Lee Fang reported at The Intercept, the orphan status is expected to create a windfall, a massive windfall, for Gilead Sciences. And by the way, remdesivir was developed with at least $79 million in U.S. government funding. U.S. government funding. Now, there is no way that drugs that receive funding from the United States in development should afterwards be solely owned by private sector companies. That's just outrageous. It's always been outrageous. We have to end that practice, and you can be certain that's another practice that's going to be ended by Bernie Sanders if he gets into the White House. The Trump administration, that goes on. Social Security Works also retreated on this particular subject. Uh, okay, it's a remark similar to Bernie Sanders' remarks, and Ryan Grimm's remarks. I'm not going to repeat it. There are other expressions, of outrage. The outrage is going to be more serious tomorrow. And as we go forward, Trump is just a monster, and we're seeing what kind of monster he is again and again in this respect. Okay, more repulsive news about the virus. I'm sure you've heard about this one by now. There's outrage as Texas Lieutenant Governor says seniors willing to risk the coronavirus infection to protect economy. This article was by Jake Johnson in Common Dreams. And Dan Patrick, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, said, let's follow the guidelines of the CDC for a few weeks and then just get back to living. Dan Patrick, the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Texas, told Fox News' disproportionately older audience on Monday night that he and other seniors would be willing to risk dying from the coronavirus in order to ensure that the economy doesn't slide into a serious recession. Patrick says, if that's the exchange, I'm all in. Says, I've talked to hundreds of people making calls all the time, and everyone says pretty much the same thing, that we can't lose our whole country. We're having an economic collapse. My message is, let's get back to work, said Patrick, who emphasized that he's a grandparent. Those of us who are 70 plus will take care of ourselves, but don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that. Don't ruin this great American dream. What great American dream? A great American dream for the governor of Texas, maybe, but not a great American dream for most of the people in the economy right now. But anyway, so he said this on Tucker Carlson's program. Tucker Carlson failed to bring him up short for it. My reaction to this is man is a moron who does not know what he is advocating for. Let's review some numbers, as we go along here. Let's review some numbers, some tentative calculations concerning this. How many people over 70 are living in the United States today? That figure is 56 million people. Over the next year, before a vaccine is out, it is expected that up to 70% of any group is likely to contract the virus in some form. The fatality rates for people over 70 in the rest of the world are showing fatality rates as high as 70%. If there are 56 million such people, then Dan Patrick is looking at 39.2 million people over 70 who will be contracting the virus. Also, we've been looking at case fatality rates in people that old of something like 15% if they contract the virus. And remember, with people going back to work, the virus will be spreading much more freely throughout the whole population, than it is now. And remember also, the antivirals are not in production yet, are not out, and there's no vaccine there. We're talking about fatality rates of 15% in this particular group. Well, multiplying by 15% fatality rate. Sorry, I botched that one up. So let me start again. Okay, multiplying by 15%, we get 5.88 million fatalities of people over 70. Does Dan Patrick know that he is advocating for nearly 6 million fatalities of people over 70? Of people over 70. Let's also consider that there are 330 million people in this country. So there are 274 people who are under 70, who are in the age range from 0 to 70. And let's do again a calculation assuming that 70% of those are going to contract the virus over the next year. That means 191.8 million people are going to be contracting it over the next year. The case fatality rate for people at large in a situation where there are no antivirals and no vaccines, and I recognize there may be some antivirals coming along, like specifically remdesivir, and coming along fast, but for now we don't have them, and we're looking at fatality rates in places like Italy that are like 5% or something like that. And remember, the Italians are beginning to flatten the curve now. The number of new cases in Italy has been going down for the last 2 days because of the shutdown actions the Italian government has taken. But Dan Patrick and Donald Trump want to get back to normal within 2 weeks. They don't want to have any shutdowns right now. They want to get back to normal. So they're not going to be bending the curve. The curve is going to be going up, okay, and it's going to be peaking. So let's look at the 191.8, and let's assume that maybe antivirals will come out, other things will happen. Some people are going to be more cautious. Let's assume we can get the fatality rate down to 2%, which is more like what we're seeing, okay, across the world right now. That's 3.84 million people dying under 70. So let's round off. Nearly 4 million people under 70 dying, nearly 6 million people over 70 dying. Dan Patrick is advocating for the elimination of 10 million Americans of all ages. That's what his recommendation means. Does he know that? Has he bothered to go through any numbers? There are lots of people who have been criticizing him, saying it's immoral, he's inhuman, this is all. Yes, he's immoral and he's inhuman, and there are other routes that we can take. And this whole suggestion, okay, is terrible. And as Representative Gene Wu said in a tweet, quote, if you ask my kids if they would rather have more stuff or have their grandpa, okay, and nana, they would choose their grandparents with no hesitation, unquote, said Wu, okay, a Democrat. quote, this statement is repulsive and unfortunately reflective of the attitude many Texas Republicans have regarding people and money, unquote. And while all that is true, none of these people evidently took the trouble to go through some of the arithmetic, including Dan Patrick, and see what he was actually calling for. So I'm telling you, he's calling for the strong likelihood that we will have millions and millions of deaths, as many as 10 million deaths, if we follow his advice. At all costs, we have to avoid his advice. Do you know what would happen to a president and to governors who allowed 10 million Americans to die due to this virus because they wanted not to shut down the whole economy? They wanted to make sure the economy was okay? I think they'd be literally hung out to dry for days in the way Benito Mussolini was handled, in Italy by the Italians at the end of World War II. That's what would happen to them, presiding over such a slaughter and such an avoidable slaughter, while around us, other countries like China, like South Korea, and like evidently Italy itself is giving a promise of being, while those countries stem the tide and recover from the virus and save their citizens because they're willing to take the bold actions that are necessary. The United States of America, the supposed greatest country in the world, will, instead of taking care of business, go for the money. Go for the money and end the lives of as many as 10 million of our citizens. This is absolutely intolerable, immoral, and stupid, because it reflects a failure to do any sorts of off the top of their head calculations about what this might cost. The potential deaths are so way out that I can't believe that even Dan Patrick wants to face a slaughter like this. He just doesn't understand what he has said. He probably figures, oh, a few 100,000 are going to die. We'll get over it. Yeah, we'll get over it. In World War II, we had 400,000 deaths with 150 million people. The scale of that is equivalent to roughly 900,000 deaths right now with the 330 million people, that we have right now. But 10 million deaths? We have never seen anything like it. We would have never seen anything like it. This country would be changed forever. Forever. And if people like Dan Patrick and Donald Trump want to see a capitalist system continue in this country, then the worst thing they could possibly do is to follow this kind of advice and allow many millions of people to die under their watch because they're unwilling to take sensible and necessary public health measures to cut off the costs of this virus to people. Okay, that's the coronavirus news tonight. Of course, it's not all about simply the coronavirus. It's also about, very much about how the coronavirus would be treated when it comes to policy. I hope, by the way, you're sharing this. I need as much help as I can get. I think this video is an important video that it needs to get out to people. Please help me by sharing this, as much as you can. Now I want to turn to the problem that people like Dan Patrick don't want to talk about, or don't want to face. specifically the problem of seeing to it that the economy doesn't collapse, that in fact it remains strong and that the people within it remain solvent. There are proposals that are on the table which are sometimes being called stimulus bills now, but they're not really stimulus bills. They're stabilization bills. They're stabilization programs to prevent, the collapse. Now, what kind of collapse, are we looking at? Well, here's some news for you. Here's some news for you. Unemployment applications. Last week, the week ending March 21st, it's now March 24th, so this is going on this week too, but we don't know if the numbers are the same. But reportedly, the first indications of what the unemployment applications were for last week, 3,400,000 applications for unemployment insurance from the newly unemployed last week, with April 1st coming. People just put in these new applications, 3.4 million of them. I can tell you that in the history of unemployment applications from 1948, and continues, try creating a new broadcast, or just remove this destination from the broadcast and then re-add it. Okay, that's what... Huh?
It's back.
Okay, good, so it's back. Okay, I don't know where this stream...